for most of us on Saturday. Then things turn a little bit milder through the second half of the weekend. A warm front, as you can see, moves its way gradually towards the east, so the wind's coming in from a bit of a milder direction on Sunday, but turning quite windy in the north. In fact, gales developing for northern and western parts of Scotland. Some rain pushing into the far northwest later on. I think much of England and Wales keeping the dry weather through the day, probably the best of the sunshine for East Anglia and the southeast. And many of us will be back in double figures, 11 degrees or so in Belfast, one of the warm spots, I think, for Sunday. Moving through into Monday, and that front just clears away towards the south. So colder for a time, perhaps the odd wintry shower in the north, but generally high pressure building through much of the week ahead. So yes, some rain in the outlook here, particularly in the north and northwest, drier in the south and turning milder than it has been. Bye-bye.
This is BBC News. I'm Martine, Croxall. The headlines at 11. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, sets out his plan to boost economic growth, prioritising reducing inflation and stabilising the economy.
Risk-taking by individuals and businesses can only happen when governments provide economic and financial stability. So the best tax cut right now is a cut in inflation.
Reports claim the controversial planned new high-speed rail link, HS2, may no longer reach central London because of rising inflation and construction costs. A man appears in court accused of planning a terrorist attack at an RAF base in Yorkshire. US President Joe Biden urges protesters in Tennessee to remain peaceful after 5 former Memphis police officers are charged with the murder of a black man, Tyree Nichols. Ceremonies are being held to mark Holocaust Memorial Day to remember the millions of people persecuted and murdered by the Nazis. At the site of the Auschwitz concentration camp, a special ceremony will take place to commemorate those who lost their lives there. Good morning, welcome to the BBC News channel. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has called for patience, discipline and optimism as he outlined the government's ambitions for economic growth. In his first major speech in the role, Mr Hunt promised a number of initiatives, such as investment zones, and said that the best tax cut for the public would be halving inflation. He described the millions of people considered economically inactive as a shocking waste of talent and potential, and promised help to encourage more people back into work. But it comes against the backdrop of a cost of living crisis and ongoing strikes about public sector pay. And it comes in a week that the government's faced accusations that it has no long-term plan for growth. The Chancellor began his speech outlining the government's top priorities that he said fall under 4 pillars.
For ease of memory,